Well,
Okay,
to
well,
one thing, there is a season, so I
yes, there
guess
is a season, and this is it. We're in it. I started writing seriously in November 2000 because, it was raining, it was gloomy, the garden wasn't doing much, and so that's always seemed to me to be prime time for writing. But at the same time, you have to be there has to be more to it. I have to be motivated to and sort of driven. And right now, I have to kind of poke myself to get going, even though it is the season. So, yeah, the optimal season is when there's nothing much going on elsewhere, but you still have to have that spark. So that's sort of where I am now. Sparkless.
Me too. I can't write whatever season it is if I'm cold. I have to be really warm to want to write. Now, that's fine in Spain because most of the time it's relatively warm, except for sort of maybe the last part of December, January, February, March, which only takes out a quarter of the year, of course. But then when it gets very hot, that can also be quite difficult. Then I just get sleepy and I want to go and have a siesta, and I don't
Mhm.
get any writing done.
Right. That's me too. I don't do hot very well, and it's too bad because we're getting hotter and hotter every summer, so I'll have to work on that. Maybe I'll go in the basement and write.
I started writing in November also, but it was 3 years after you, Audrey, 2003. But I don't have any thoughts about one season or another is better or different for me when it comes to writing. There are other things that create challenges and roadblocks and opportunities, and I don't know that seasons or the temperature or anything like that. I've never even thought of that, to be honest, as a part of when I can write or when I'm more able to write or anything like that. So
I was going to say I don't think I have a specific season, although I think the high points of both summer and winter, I might be at my most active writing because some summer I'm outdoors a lot, and for some reason, I guess more active that generates a lot more ideas. My brain is more active. And in winter, it's just nice to be indoors and ensconced, and I could focus a little better. So probably at the extreme ends, I might be doing my most writing, but now that you brought it up, maybe I will start a journal and track the amount of time and see, because I am a scientist at heart. So I think I'll maybe map it out and chart it.
I believe this. I believe that yes, summer is the time. I mean, it's almost like crops. You're planting the ideas in summer because it's sunny, it's nice, you're getting outside doing things, and your brain is, like Richard said, it's working. But because you're outside doing all this stuff, there's not a lot of time, at least for me. I can't sit out and write. I'm not gonna do that. I'll be doing other stuff outside, and the days are long. So, but then come the fall and the winter is when those ideas that you've been letting grow in there can be actually written out. And so these days in Ohio, it's like perfect. It's cold, it's dreary, it's gray. You don't want to be outside. You just, it's a good time to stay in and hammer away at the keyboard. Now, with all that said, I feel like I don't get near as much writing done in the winter as I should. I'm like, it's I got maybe a few sentences out here and there or something. I should be writing like novel after novel or something. But I still think that's the way it works best for me. Um, get your ideas in the summer and write it out in the winter and fall.
I wonder if it has something to do with people who live in areas where there really are more um, clear seasons. Living in Sacramento means that for the most part, yes, we do have winter right now. We're in the middle of a cold, rainy period. But when I say cold and rainy in Sacramento, I mean the highs in the day are still in the 50s.
Hmm.
And the rain is here or there. The last time I saw snow actually in Sacramento where I lived was I think I was 7 or 8 years old. So do the math, and that's more than 50 years ago. And in the summer, there's a period of a couple of weeks, not necessarily all at the same time, where it's over 100 or 110, and the last thing you want to do is go outside. But I would say 90% of the time in Sacramento, indoors, outdoors, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So seasons here aren't necessary. I don't think they're like the same kind of dividing lines that they are in Canada or Ohio or New Jersey. And Lucinda, I think for you also, Spain is probably kind of like Sacramento too. I think we have pretty comparable climates.
Yeah,
Yes,
with,
we
it's
probably
what
do.
you
Yeah.
it's the garden. I mean, there's stuff. There's always stuff to do in the summer, like weeding and cutting things down and hovering over things and watering, because especially now. But in the winter, it's just kind of sitting there, and there's not much to do except kind of look around and say, oh yeah, plants are still here or not, and that's about it. But yeah, I also there's other activities people do in summer. They go camping or they go on road trips or stuff like that. So that's
Yeah.
distracting. And then there's the whole reading issue. Like a lot of inspiration comes from reading. So, winter is a good time for that too, in places with sort of harsher winter climates. So, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure how it works physiologically, whether there's things that happen to your body, like when the shorter days, right? Winter days are short, regardless of
I was
what the
gonna bring up.
temperature is. So that could be part of it too.
Yeah, I was going to say that the further north you are, the more the disparity between summer and winter amount of sunlight. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's got it, and that does have an effect that it's been shown. So
Yeah, I know I suffer from SAD, and if it's overcast for 3, 4, 5 days in a row, or even longer, then I get very depressed. Now, sometimes that will spur me on to sit down and start writing because they'll disappear into whatever sphere I'm in, part of the novel I'm in. But we haven't had that much right now, and I must admit I have been a bit diverted recently, like feeling very ashamed. I've been here for such a long time. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm spending an hour and a half a day on my Spanish. And also I'm reading. I've read, I think, 9 books this year because I'm a reviewer. And so I'm desperately trying to build up my book marketing budget. So I'm reading frantically and reviewing, which is giving me lots of ideas, but it's a question of finding the time now to incorporate.
I think I have the opposite of SAD. If it's too bright and kind of that relentless, really bright sunshine and not a cloud in the sky for too long, I start feeling like I want to crawl under a rock. So, so yeah, it's funny. I like cloudy days. In fact, there's times in the summer when I think, oh, I need some clouds here, but yeah, everyone's different, I guess.
I'll send them all over to you, Audrey, with pleasure.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else on seasons? I agree with Bertold though, it's an interesting analogy that you made, and I think that there's something to be said for that. That there's some period where, the ideas are growing, and then there's another period where you put that idea into writing. It's just a question of how long those periods are, when they happen, and if they are kind of tied to the seasons.
I think
it's kind of like what you said about pondering, Mark. Remember, there's an ingredient for writing. That pondering time is when you're not writing and you're not really doing any planning exactly, but you're just kind of incubating your ideas and hoping they turn into something.
What were you going to say, Bertold?
Well, yeah, I was sort of related to that. I was going to say you have to spend a lot of time pondering sometimes, I think, before you get it, and it may take years. Like I first thought of writing the story about a space elevator like 15 years before I actually wrote the story. So,
Right.
it can take a while.
I'm going nuts at the moment because I saw or read or either on TV or I heard it on radio or I read it. Absolutely perfect thing to put in the book I'm writing at the moment. and I can't remember it because I didn't write it down at the time. So I'm spending hours thinking, what was it? What was I going to include? It's driving me insane.
I hate when that happens, when you have a great idea and then you forget it, and then the greatness of the idea sort of grows and grows as you realize you've forgotten it, and then you beat yourself up over that.
I always use my handy cell phone nearby. I have a notes page that's writing ideas, like a group of those, and also I will occasionally use the recorder because if I'm just really busy, I'll just hit that, and just start speaking. Uh, so that's how I capture most of those. But
Yeah, I use the notes app on my phone more and more frequently these days for a whole bunch of different things.
so one other side comment, because you mentioned how it takes years often to come up with to come up with the idea and complete that idea into fruition, to the book. And I have to say that's definitely me. It does take me a while, but I was thinking one day, would it be different if that were my job? I mean, yeah, I think there'd be a lot more pressure if that were my sole source of income, et cetera. But I don't think it would be that different. Like, I try to figure out, how long does it really take me to write a book? Is it taking years because, well, there's not the pressure? Or is it taking years because that's just my process? I think it's more the latter. I'll never know, unless I could create an alternate universe and watch there. But I don't know about the rest of you. I mean, is there, from concept to completion, is there that long of a time, or are you able to roll them out?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark.
Well, it varies for me. And as we've talked about many times with respect to my writing life, there was a period of time for about 10 years where I was just writing and writing and writing, and I would come up with an idea and write it. Now I'm very much not doing that. But you mentioned, if it was your job, would it be the same? So if we got to the discussion on the recipe for writing, I was going to talk about, just a minute. Someone's calling me. I have to decline it. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my first job out of law school required me to do a lot of writing. I was an administrative hearing officer, which meant I conducted hearings and wrote the decisions deciding the legal issues raised in the hearings. And those decisions could be anywhere from 5 pages to 30 pages. And I think back to that time, and we also had a deadline. Our decisions had to be issued within a certain number of days after the hearing. And so we always had to face that deadline. But every decision I wrote, I had to think about, I had to ponder. And, it's not creative writing like fiction, but there still is some thought you have to go through in terms of, okay, what are the issues? What are the facts? What are the rules? What's the analysis? What's the conclusion? And how to put that together in a decision that makes sense and complies with our requirements. And I, like I said, every decision I wrote, I had to do that. And sometimes it was for a couple of days, sometimes it was longer. And with writing fiction, even though I was very productive in those first 10 years, whatever story I was on was always in here. I mean, we never really talked about it with my kids and my wife, but I have no doubt there were many dinners and other family times where I was like this.
See,
that looks right.
Yeah.
And the thing that worries me now is I just don't do that anymore. I'm not, the story that I might be working or might want to work on, it's not so present in my head the way it used to be.
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead.
I can relate to that, Mark, because I mean, for years I was writing to broadcast deadlines or event deadlines, and I sort of kept going and kept going. And then after retirement, and I started writing novels as such, and I've actually written 16 in the last 10 years. Now, I know I haven't got burnout because I've had that before, when I've really been working hell for leather for days and weeks on end and having no weekends off and all the rest of it. I'm working sort of 18-hour days. So I haven't got burnout, but I tell you what I do have, and it's freaking me out big time. I have never, ever had to search for words. when I sat down to write, every word that I wanted, every adjective, every adverb, every sentence construction just flowed. It just came. Don't ask me where from, but it just came. Now I'll stop in the middle of a sentence and think, what word do I need?
Hmm.
So I check with the thesaurus.
Yeah.
It's not coming. It might be that I'm not quite as young as I was, like I'm very old now. And I have word retrieval sometimes when I'm talking, unless I'm in full flow. If the conversation's very slow and there's long pauses and such like. But that is really freaking me out at the moment. So whether I'll ever do much more writing, I shall never know. I've really got to push myself now.
I just want to clarify something. During my career, my ultimate career as a user interface and business analyst, I did a ton of writing, and very often, to your point, it was something that, I could probably write a research paper when I was doing, user interface stuff. There was a lot of thought that had to go into it. Then I had to get that all down, and it did take sometimes a while, sometimes not, depending on what data I had available. But there was a lot of writing. But for me, writing, say, fiction, etc., getting the concept in my head. And yes, I do that often too, Mark, with just kind of be zoning out even when people are around because I just got an idea. But getting that concept and then fleshing that out to me it's like a different part of my brain. It's like a different process, and it does take years. Where I would never be able to do that in the work that I did. But what I was talking about is I would say a writer with an agent, with an agent, and I had advances that they'd give me for the next book, et cetera. Would I be churning them out, or would I be like the George R. Martin? So that's why I wasn't just a process of writing, because my gosh, I've killed enough trees in my job, but this process, this creative process, just seems so much different and takes me a while. And that, so to both of your points, that, you come with your ideas, et cetera, I just want to make sure that what I'm talking about with business there was a lot of writing, just to let you know that, enormous amount. But this process, this is different for me.
So the interesting thing is, I don't have an agent. I don't have a publisher. My deadlines are my own.
Yeah.
The two experiences I've had where I have had short stories included in an anthology, and there was a deadline to submit your story by. And one of those is the anthology that I'm actually working on right now with a couple of other writers. With a deadline, I was able to write the short story I needed to write well before the deadline. And I just wonder if that could be something that I need, which is, I didn't need it when I first started doing this stuff, but now maybe that's what I need. And someone has to give me a deadline, and it has to be a real deadline. And that might finally force me to sit down and, do something.
Yeah, I did that once. I was in a group of people where we submitted short stories for a combined book anthology, and gosh, I was so unhappy with my end product. Not because I felt like the writing was rushed, but the concept was rushed.
Yeah,
I had to come up with an idea by a certain time, and I did, but I don't think it was the best. And I think I could have done a lot better. I mean, they were all happy with it, but I'm usually at least satisfied in my work. But that one, I was just like, I didn't even want to reread it in the edits. I was just, so I don't know. You are right that the deadlines would definitely make me get something out in time.
Yeah.
What I want. I know. So the rest of you, I don't know how do you deal with that? If it's a different process for you, or like you said, Bertel, it took you years to write your elevator story. So I kind of get that. I think I understand that.
Yeah, I think it is a different process. I think that creating a fictional world, really, I mean, even if you're not writing fantasy, you have to kind of create this milieu in which your characters live and kind of animate them. And that's way different from, say, writing
work. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. And I think I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of quite famous writers like, oh dear, now you see my mind's gone blank, um, s- have been writing with other writers, sort of by so and so with such and such,
Yeah.
right? And they haven't been as good. And I think they have gone down. People have talked about it and said, look, I'm not going to buy any more so and so's books anymore because they're really not up to standard. But now I've noticed that a lot of them have gone back to writing their own books all by themselves. And I think the pressure I felt is that in order to keep your readers and increase your readers and hopefully increase the money that comes in, the royalties, is that you have to keep putting out a book every 6 months, 4 months, 3 months. I've heard of a writer that writes one every 10 days.
Oh,
Do you
jeez.
believe?
I'm
And
so
he's making a fortune. He really is. But you actually do run out of ideas eventually, especially if it's a series. Well, I do anyway.
Hmm.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, I think you'd probably start repeating things,
Yeah.
and how could you even keep everything straight? And I think, yeah, those kind of created under pressure. Like people get these 3 book deals with a publisher and they have to deliver. And I think when that happens, the writing becomes sort of coarse textured. The nuances aren't there and the subtleties and stuff. Okay, maybe some readers don't care about that stuff. In fact, I'm pretty sure they don't, looking at what I see in reviews. These 5-star reviews of books that aren't really that great. In fact, I've got a blog post coming out on that next week. So I won't talk about it anymore. But I think, yeah, I think you really do need time to incubate something if you're going to get a good written creation. If you're just cranking out units or product, well, it's going to show. And I think you really have to have that fan base kind of on autopilot to buy every single book. And maybe that's what they're aiming for. I think that's got to be it. Rather than, creating a unique and really good book every single time.
Is this the part of the episode where we take our shot at Stephen King? Or
well, I want to take a shot at the guy who writes a book every 10 days. I'm sorry, but that means they're basically using a formula and plugging words into that formula. There's absolutely no way you could write a creative, good story. I'm assuming they're novel length stories, or at least
Yes.
novella.
Yeah.
That's
No,
impossible.
they're a bit longer.
That's
Yeah.
just impossible.
Well, I'm just taking it from what he wrote on Facebook,
No,
and then
no,
he pasted a picture of his royalties, and
I've heard those stories too of people who claim that they write a novel every month and they've been doing it for years or whatever. It's like, oh, I just as Audrey said, those are not going to be very well written books, and they're going to follow the formula.
Nowadays, they might even be using AI, at
Yeah.
least to kind of put the scaffolding together or some sort of basic plot, and then maybe they'll go in and dress it up a bit. I bet you that's
yeah, the one I'm thinking of at the moment. I think I read this about 18 months ago, and I think that was probably a bit early for AI. But I think it answers a need if you're doing a job that you're not happy about, and all you want to do is write for a living. That is possibly how you manage to do it and pay the mortgage and the bills and all the rest of it. So it's not for me now because I did that with other writing, but not the creative writing for a really good novel.
I want
Short things.
I want to back up to what Bertold said. I don't understand your dig at Stephen King. The man is a literary genius. I hang on every single word he writes.
I know, Mark. I know you're a big fan, especially The Dark Tower, right? You love it.
Yeah. Anyways, okay.
I was going to say, and this is pertinent to Mark. I have to submit a story for an anthology, and the deadline is Wednesday, I think. So I think I've got something ready to go. Although I sort of know what Richard was talking about as well, of like, this I could do better. But the fact is, if I hadn't had a hard deadline, I wouldn't have done anything. and I would have
Right.
sat there and done nothing. So having something to submit by a deadline forced me to write.
Well, I'm sure that the editors of the anthology are looking forward to your submission. Okay. I know on our list of topics there's a couple of ideas, but I think that not Audrey, Lucinda, you're the only one that really tries to effectively communicate with your readers. I don't know any of us. I don't think any of us have a newsletter, or some of us write things on our blogs occasionally or whatever, but we don't have newsletters. The other one was book promotion platforms, and I think several of us don't use those. I have tried to use book promotion platforms, and I've decided to never use them again because I just don't think they work anymore. And I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on either of those topics, book promotion platforms or communicating with readers.
No, the only readers I communicate with are people who follow my blog who happen to have read some of my books. And that's about it. And I don't really post a lot about my books either. I mean, they're out there, people know about them, they can see the stuff on my blog on the sidebar, and I don't, that's it. Unless I'm doing something new, I don't really mention that kind of thing. And as far as platforms, I've never used any, and I sort of have a feeling I'm not going to, because I'm sort of lazy, and that's it.
Audrey, I mean, your blogs come out regularly because I do subscribe to them. I don't always read your gardening ones because I can't tell a dandelion from a buttercup. But your other blogs, I definitely read them from beginning to end. Do you think it increases sales?
I don't know. Possibly, but my sales are pretty small. So if one person read a blog post and bought a book, that'd be, noteworthy. It's that bad. But no, I don't. No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think any increase in sales would be incidental. Like what I'm hoping is that people will read the posts and think, this person knows how to, write, how to put sentences together that are clear, and there aren't typos and there aren't any errors and stuff. And she seems to have some interesting ideas. And yeah, she's written these books, and maybe I should have a look. So if that happens, maybe it does. That's great. But it's not really like a campaign of any sort.
I would say 99.9% of my interaction comes via social media. It is partly and mostly my fault, if you want to call it a fault, but because I don't blog. And the only reason I don't blog is because at the time, like I said, I had full-time jobs. I didn't have the time. It was either write and have a job or blog and have a job. But now, I don't know. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. But to that first comment about social media, I would say that it's interesting. I didn't think originally that I was generating sales. It's very rare that I see someone like on Twitter, and don't even dare ask me to call it anything else, but Twitter, I would post something, and once in a long while, somebody might say, hey, I bought your book because, what you type is so funny. I thought, I go, yeah. That doesn't usually happen, possibly because I'm not that funny, or possibly because it's just not a good launching point. But interesting enough, I did go and branch out a bit to other media sites, and one was Instagram, because I heard so many people say, oh, you go on Instagram, but what am I going to put on Instagram? So I also started taking photos, but there was one person who said, hey, I like your photographs and I bought your book. And another one on Threads. I went to Threads, and they're actually I'm using those as my photograph outlets. I tend to look at content. And also on Threads said, and I don't know how valid I bought your book for my mother because I think she would like it. And I don't know if his mother, I said, well, I hope she doesn't disown you. But I don't know if but the person on Instagram, the other photographer, loved the book. And I was like, hey, yay, it actually worked. As for sales, I have noticed when I do every so often a free giveaway of the digital because Amazon allows you to do every, I don't know what it is, 90 days, 120 days. You can have a 5-day period where your digital book is free. And that's when I noticed like I could get up to 100 or more downloads. But how many people actually read them? I don't know, but they're all like pages read. I get things like that. It seems like a lot of pages read, and I do get some money off of that. But I will say that for every maybe 100 digital downloads that seem to go nowhere, I don't know, like people just download them, I guess, and maybe read them someday, maybe not. But maybe one person out of those hundreds will actually buy a paperback instead. So it is drawing people in. And again, I'm not a high sales like type person. I'm an unknown person. So that could be, though, a general good indicative that if you do occasionally free giveaways, you might generate what I would consider the real sale, which would be a paperback. Because, like I said, I can't really tell out of all those who downloaded it how many are actually reading it. So it doesn't count as anything. If you download it for free and never look at it, what is it actually? I don't know. So anyway,
My new philosophy is that I'm going to make it as hard as I can on readers to even find my books. And that way, the few who do will feel rewarded. They'll be like, wow, we managed to get hold of that book. It was amazing.
It's an exclusive club.
That strategy does work. The exclusivity draft, it's a good one.
Lucinda, have you used book promotion platforms, and if you have, how recently, and have they worked for you?
In the past, they've worked. I've tried all of them, right? I've had 2 book bubs, but they cost you $800 a time, right? So it's not okay. You do make a profit on it. It's not massive, but you do. But I think they've changed. I think they're getting more desperate now. Uh, they're now giving you 20% off, 30% off, 40% off. And the last one I did was about 5 months ago, and I didn't even make my money back.
Yeah.
So I just think there are too many of them. And it's a shame because when it started, there was I felt when I first sort of joined the writing community, independently published. I mean, it was a great group. It was different Facebook groups and that. It wasn't just one. But there was a lot of interaction, a lot of help, a lot of technical help, ideas, people doing covers for other people. It was great. But it all seems to my mind, to have actually, there's just so much out there now that you're lost in the jungle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't, I mean, I've done the TV interviews, I've done the radio interviews, I've done virtually every book thing. I even signed up, although I unsigned, for one of these, and that might be a topic for another day if we run out of time, is I don't know if you will get lots of emails from people offering courses.
I don't get emails, but I see things on the blogosphere.
Yeah.
And they are expensive, and they seem to sort of promise you this, that, and the other. But I don't know. I mean,
I'm suspicious of those. I suspect they just want people to sign up, and whether they actually deliver any results, especially if it's sort of up to you to take what they give you and create your own results, then they can say, well, you obviously didn't work at it hard enough. So, and thanks for the $1,000 or whatever.
But
so I'm not sucked in.
The one I signed up for, because he does know what he's talking about to a large extent, I think. But the first thing was change all your book covers. And I said, but hang on a minute, I actually like my book covers. I've had a few people have said to me, wow, your book covers are great, and they are serialized and they all match, etc., etc. Oh, and it's going to cost me a fortune to change them all.
I've decided that opinions about titles and book covers are like weeds growing in your garden. I'm not sure if that's a good analogy, but somebody told me that One Night in Bridgeport sounded like a travelogue. And then I had another novel that I published called Weed Therapy, and he said, well, that sounds like a gardening book. and I mean, it's just, you know, titles and covers, you do what you want. And if people are going to criticize those things, like I said, their opinion is as good as 25 other people's opinions.
I will say this in the publishing industry, especially for authors who have series, they do every like 3 or 4 years refresh those covers, and it does hike up sales. It's not changing the titles, it's just a refresh to the covers. So, it's not like the old covers were bad. In fact, some of them, like I have the Ursula Le Guin Earthsea trilogy, the original covers, and I love this little fish that goes through the spines if you put them all up together, the three of them. But they do refresh them and they do increase sales. But you can't do it like every year or something. It has to be at a point where you feel like, all right, the book is known, the book is it's a little on the stale side. Do this, and it does seem to work. So I will say, from what I've seen in the publishing industry, that may be true. So I don't know about anything else.